Well, welcome back, everybody, for the first Tech Whispers podcast featuring a Chief Information Security Officer. And not just any CISO, but a Hall of Fame, business impacting, top of her game CISO. This, of course, would have to be United Airlines' Deneen DeFiore. Deneen has cracked the code on what some believe is an impossible job. She's figured out how to provide clarity in a sea of complexity. And her leadership story and philosophies could be summed up in one word, and that would be balance. Think about balancing the need to secure our companies, yet be an enabler to the business. Think about balancing the need to go faster, to enable your company to achieve greater velocity while keeping the trains on the rails. Or I guess in this case, keeping the planes in the sky. It's kind of a big deal. And also balancing the competing interests and priorities from far-ranging stakeholders, both inside and outside the company. And last but not least, but balancing the art and the science of her profession. And she does that with grace and grit and a growth mindset. So Deneen, welcome to the show. And, let's start off with, because you're a business first CISO. So tell me, how's business?
It's actually great. We just got done with earnings week and announced that we ran the best operation this quarter that we've ever done as an airline. So the least amount of flight and seat cancellation. So we were number one. And leisure travel is back. Business is getting there, but everything's looking good.
Congratulations. That was exciting news. Not surprising news, but exciting news to see. And there's another company in the industry, I won't mention names, who maybe is aspiring to that these days, right?
We all aspire.
Yeah. No, great job. And, you're the consummate airline business executive first, right? So when you pop out of bed in the morning, and I know you do, you got a lot of energy. What's on your mind? How are you thinking about the business as you get your day going?
Right. I think, in the context of what I can do and what a team does to make sure that United is secure and protected, it's really around maintaining the resiliency of our operation. So, ensuring that we can run a continuous operation in an event of a cyber incident, or in addition, the ways that we're proactively protecting our business.
Yeah. So complex business on many levels, right? A lot of moving parts. Your CEO put out a big, bold agenda. We got a chance to read about that. The 4 pillars. I recommend people going and reading those. Exciting. So maybe open up your playbook a little bit and, what are the stages as you're leading initiatives, as you're leading a transformation initiative? Do you have stages that you go through to lead your organization?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's, a couple of aspects that you have to think about in any transformation, or if you're achieving kind of your North Star goal, right? That aspirational goal that you want to set and achieve. And I think the first thing it really needs to be is being what I call brilliant at the basics. So setting those table stakes and making sure that those baseline, in my case, cybersecurity protections, regulatory compliance obligations are there, and that we are able to maintain those as a course of doing business, doing DT, doing technology, doing digital, right? So making sure that we have vulnerability management, identification, or remediation as part of our muscle memory, right? And we just do it as part of it. It's not extra. And we all know how to do that. And that gives you the credibility then to, do the other things, the initiatives, the next set, I would say, part of the strategy around advancing our capabilities, right? So we have the basics in place, and then we are constantly looking at the threat environment, how that is changing and how that's impacting United and the commercial aviation industry. And then we're changing, we're changing the bar as we understand what is happening. So for instance, a few years ago when it was destructive attacks, we had to look at our cybersecurity strategy differently. It started off around, as any cybersecurity strategy does, around data protection, right? But those disruptive attacks really made us open our eyes and say we needed a strategy that took into consideration resiliency at a much higher level of priority. So an example was, our segmentation strategy that we were going forward, our network segmentation strategy was based historically on zones, right, of data and sensitivity. This is the PCI zone, the PII zone, whatever, and we would put segmentation and data protection capabilities in. But then as we looked at the changing threat environment, we had to move towards, okay, if it's operational disruption that we're really, really concerned about, how do we put the segmentation around those core operational capabilities and protect our business in that sense of the blast radius? So, it's not just about data protection, but it's about resiliency. So, we're really at the basics. We're understanding our environment to continue to advance our capabilities. And then, of course, we're aligning we're securing the outcomes that the business is going to drive. In our case, it's United Next. As the business is in growth mode, we have, I think 500 or 700, whatever the number is, it keeps growing, planes on order of our connected fleet. And we're changing our customer experience to be much more, seamless and transparent and trusted across our digital channels and the way you interact with our employees and our products. We're making sure that those are built from a secure by design standpoint as well. So it's really around those three prongs that we, look at that transformational strategy, and then we're, achieving and setting those goals and outcomes.
So a lot of moving parts, a lot of collaboration, cross-functional collaboration. One of the things that makes up your brand is the winning as a team. You're big into that, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
Preparing this, I was really curious to ask you about a particular partnership. I was thinking about the CISO, the CIO, the Chief Customer Officer, right? Yourself, Jason Birnbaum, your CIO, also from GE, like yourself. And she doesn't need introductions, but Linda Jojo, legend, right? And now the Chief Customer Officer. So take us inside the room. What's that collaboration like for the three of you?
Yeah, so I think it's a really it's a great dynamic and it's a great partnership. Jason and I are peers, and we hold each other accountable for making sure we're doing the right things for United. And I'm prioritizing business outcomes, making sure that cybersecurity is enabling us to do things that we haven't done before instead of putting roadblocks in place. And he's making sure that he understands, my world and the risks and threats, and he's holding himself and his team accountable to make sure that all those great digital capabilities that we're introducing for our customers and our employees are, secure and trusted. So we work really, really well. And then Linda, she brings that just awesome business perspective, connecting the dots and pulling the threads for all of us. And then really keeping, again, the customer view and impact top of mind, right? So, because everything we're doing is to make sure that our customers are getting, safely, securely, and, hopefully enjoyably from point A to point B. And, as we lean into digital and we lean into, taking our strategy to a more trusted level, she's a great person to kind of oversee that across the board. So it's a great partnership. I love working with both of them.
Yeah, I bet they say the same thing. And I think about the different constituencies that are on your radar, your team's radar. There's internal, external. We probably do an entire podcast just on that, right? But maybe highlight some of those different audiences that you need to collaborate with, partner with, influence, communicate, educate.
Sure. So I think internally, of course, in United, there's definitely a cross-functional approach to cybersecurity. So, we look at that collaboratively across a lot of the functions. So if it's, technical operations, airport operations, legal, safety, physical security, digital technology, of course, we're all kind of on the same page and we're all on the same team, and making sure that, as initiatives kick off or risks are identified or, hey, I'm thinking about doing this, we're all collaborating and talking on a very, very consistent basis. But, there's also a lot around, externally that happens too, that especially as a CISO in the commercial aviation sector, because we operate as an ecosystem that I have to be connected into. So definitely my industry peers, even though we're competitors in a lot of cases, we're talking about things and approaches and best practices and, really trying to set the baseline of the ecosystem and keep, advancing and making sure we have those capabilities across the board. And that includes, not just my, like I said, my airline peers, but also OEMs and suppliers like the GEs, like the Boeings, Airbuses, and things like that. So we're constantly communicating and collaborating that way. And then, like many other industries, regulators and policymakers, there's no shortage of action in that space, and really understanding the outcomes that policymakers and regulators are trying to achieve, and what they're suggesting from a rules perspective are really going to be feasible and achieve that risk reduction. So building a lot of relationships with the different federal agencies and global agencies to ensure we're doing the right thing for aviation.
Yeah. One thing you show in the past, I just hit me very strongly is, as an industry with my peers, we don't compete on safety.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, as somebody who's on your plane, I appreciate that. And by the way, if you're listening on audio, go check out the YouTube version of this, because Deneen is sitting in a beautiful United airplane background. What's you know what the equipment is there where you're sitting in?
I can't remember what the plane model is, but it's definitely features our Polaris business class seat. So it's a great way to fly. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. It is gorgeous. Bringing collaboration internal. As leaders, we've got to build great teams, and you get this Deneen-ism I think we can all learn from. And you talk about, I force collaboration until I don't have to.
That's right.
What does that mean?
Yeah. We were just had my extended leadership team last week, and there was a lot of discussion around this. But I think, it's really important, like you had mentioned earlier, right? I have a philosophy that we win as a team. We create shared goals and outcomes, and we all make sure that we're contributing and we understand how we contribute to those outcomes. So if one person does great, but another person is kind of caught off guard or wasn't involved or included as they needed to be, that's not exactly a win, right? So I make sure that everybody is talking to who they need to, whether they like it or not. It feels kind of, I always say, it will feel forced at first, but until it happens organically, I'm going to set the operating rhythms, and I'm going to make sure that we're bringing people in, and I'm asking questions, and I'm making sure this person is talking to that person and connecting the dots for them. But as those interactions become more trusted, and people start to see the benefits, then they can happen on their own. So I definitely one of my tricks of my trade there, for sure.
Yeah. Kevin Hart was just on. He's one of the great CIO to CEO stories, and he talked about being in college as junior year soccer team captain. They had like the worst record in school history. He's like, I'm the MVP of the worst team ever. He's like, there's no reward there.
No. No. Yeah.
They wanted to turn it around and have the best season ever the next year, which is pretty cool. But
that's right.
In the introduction, I talked about the CISO, the Great CISO Balancing Act, right? Which everyone talks about it. I see very few finessing it and pulling it off, right? And so how do you secure the business at the same time enabling agility, enabling innovation, digital transformation, all these great things you talked about that lead to the results you just announced?
Yeah, I think it's really a couple of things. As a chief information security officer, you really need to understand your business operations and what the goals are, right? Because you're there to protect the company, but you're also there to create shareholder value and achieve those business outcomes. So you need to understand that so you can align your approach and strategy, and also your risk tolerance, right, to that level. What was important for me to focus on in my previous company around like laser focused IP protection is not my number one risk and goal, risk to mitigate here at United Airlines. So shifting that thinking and understanding and adjusting kind of the priorities and the strategy around that is number one. And then number two is really around communication, getting to everybody to understand what those risks are and what the trade-offs are, right? We're going to operate in a high-risk country and we don't have the capability to, segment our environment or, restrict access in the way we have, then I need to outline that for the, business leaders. And we have to make a decision. Is that worth the revenue, the growth, the whatever, the margin that we're going to get? And, we'll make a decision. So it's really understanding your business operations and then setting that risk tolerance and getting everybody to understand to make those decisions.
Yeah, appreciate that. One of the amazing parts of your story, the news came out last year, joining the board of a public company, Blackbot. So congratulations again.
Thank you.
That was just one of those that we see more and more. I think we'll see it more going forward. But when you went through that process, as you look back on that, with SEC regulations shifting, a lot more CISOs and CIOs aspire to be on board. So any lessons learned, tips, any coaching you could provide?
Sure. So the process is long, that's for sure. Just be prepared for that. It's not going to be short. You're going to be interviewing and talking to folks for a long time. Secondly, find a company and that you're a fit for, that you believe in their mission, their vision, their product, whatever it is. Don't be on a board to be on a board, right? Be on a board because it's a company that you can, that you put the interest of your expertise to work for the interests of the shareholders, right? So find that. That's really important, I think. And also the fit with the other board members and the management team. You want to make sure that like culturally and personally, like it's a good fit that way. Also, the other thing that's really important that I don't think people think of right off the bat is, if you have a full-time job as a CISO or a technology executive or whatever, you have a lot of commitments, right? So make sure that the time that the board, that you can dedicate that time, not only for board meetings, understand the dates and the conflicts that you're going to have. Because if the board meetings the company's board meetings are in conflict with like key dates of your own company's calendar, that you're just not going to be able to take that opportunity. So board meetings are scheduled 2 years in advance usually. So ask for that calendar and make sure there's no conflicts there. And you're set up for success there. And then, I think it's really great that companies are understanding that the expertise and risk management capabilities and oversight that a CISO can bring to their board is important to them. And I think it's great that we're seeing more and more companies do that. And the opportunity I have with Blackbot is great. But as a board member, that is not your job, right? You're not single focused. It's not a single lens. Yes, you're going to participate in the risk and technology committee or whatever it is, or the cybersecurity committee or the audit committee, wherever they manage that. And you're going to be the expert there, and you're going to make sure that that the team's doing things right. And the questions you're asking are thought provoking and things like that. But there's a lot around just corporate governance and board responsibility for, are you gonna issue a dividend or not, right? Or CEO succession planning and things like that, right? Or some other corporate governance activities that are not typically what we as technology leaders get exposed to. And that's a lot of what being a board member is. So make sure that you're prepared for that. You're, getting out if you went to business school, getting out your corporate governance textbooks or doing some kind of training, and be prepared for that, because that is the majority of work that you're going to do, and you're expected to add value as a board member.
Yeah, I've heard it's upwards of public board 250 hours a year.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's lots of committee meetings or special meetings, or in addition to the quarterly board meetings. Yeah.
But when you're flying business class and you're doing your prep work, it's not so bad, right? It's,
no, I can handle it.
Staying with the board theme, Deneen, we've heard the stories. I hear the stories all the time about the CISO's presentation to the board and it's usually not good, right? You're good at this, right? So you see it on both sides. You are a great communicator to the board. You're now a recipient of presentation to the board. So share your playbook, if you would. What makes a good CISO presentation to the board?
Yeah. So even before the presentation, you really need to understand kind of the committee members that you're going to be presenting to, understand their backgrounds, their perspectives. There's typically one or two, I'll say tech savvy or cyber savvy folks. You want to make sure that you're creating a trusted relationship with them and understand what's top of mind for them, and where they're kind of at in their understanding. The other thing too is really to understand from a board perspective what other boards they're on, or if they're at a company that, if they're a CFO at a company right now, they're hearing their CISOs pitch, right? So you want to make sure that you're connecting with your other peers to say, okay, hey, what's on your agenda? What did you talk about? Or, if there's a big event, hey, this is how I'm going to frame this, so you're consistent, or if you're not consistent and you're at least understanding where the disconnects are, and you can explain that, because that's the point of reference from a board member. Remember, they're coming in, they're hearing about cybersecurity once a quarter, more than likely, right? Or maybe even less than that. So understanding that perspective. And then from your presentation, I like to make sure that it's consistent. There's no surprises, right? So set the agenda. Each time you're going to hear from me, you're going to hear the overall kind of threat landscape and why it matters to United, right? You're going to hear a program update around, we set these outcomes. We're going toward these 3 goals, the most important things, and here's where we're at to them. And so they understand that you have it, you're managing the risk, and they feel comfortable with it, right? Regulatory update, because there's a lot of stuff going on, and what our plan to comply, why should they care? Things like that. And if there's any other education that you need to do with them, like there's always things that are happening in the media, and you want to make sure that you are pulling those kind of current events in cyber in and saying, hey, this is why you should care about it. And this is what we're doing about it at United, and what is our exposure? Are we good? Are we, still have some work to do, things like that. But like have that consistent agenda, because if you go in there and you talk about, like detailed metrics one time, and then the next time you're talking about, a capability maturity assessment, and then the next time you're talking about some other thing, they're not sure what to expect or what questions to ask. Having that consistency, and then they'll give you feedback, right? They'll say, hey, those 4 things are great, but I'd also want to talk about X, Y, Z. And you can start to kind of hone in and evolve your presentation and the information that you present to the board.
Brilliant. A lot of good nuggets there. I didn't hear anything about fear as a strategy.
It didn't. I remember I did like a roundtable just yesterday, or was it yesterday or the day before? Losing track of time, with like the upcoming CISOs, and somebody asked me about my first board presentation, and I was like, gosh, it was kind of a long time ago. I'm dating myself, but I remember I was scared to death to go in that boardroom. I was scared to death. I mean, I was nervous, red faced. It was not a fun experience. But each time it gets better, and now it's like having a conversation, which is good.
Yeah, you got to just get through those uncomfortable parts, right?
Yeah.
Just got to work through it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
good tips. We like to pull some people in with some audience questions. We've got 2 really outstanding ones for you, Deneen. So let's listen in to the first one. Have some fun with the question. Tell us who this is.
Deneen is a great addition to the Blackbaud board. Your background in IT and cybersecurity is a wonderful addition to our board. My question for you is, what do companies need to do to stay on top of the ever-changing cyber landscape, especially with the emergence of artificial intelligence capabilities coming to market?
Who is that, Deneen?
That is Mike from our CEO at Blackbaud. Yeah, great. I'm glad you got a question from him.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. That's a great question. Great, very important relationship, right, for him and for you.
Yes.
So thanks, Mike. So what do you think about his question?
No, I think it's a great question. Cybersecurity is one of those risks and kind of domains that change on a minute by minute basis. So you really have to understand what those emerging risks and threats are. And the way you do that really is around having a threat intel based program, right? To understand what is going on, not only in your environment and your industry, but other connecting and adjacent industries. So understanding those trends and informing your cybersecurity strategy with threat intelligence is really important, as well as your business outcomes based on the technology platforms that your DT and technology teams are looking at. Like as Mike said, as Chat GPT comes in or generative AI comes in place, that opens a whole new kind of attack vector as well as risks that weren't thought of before. I probably should have, if I had the question beforehand, I would have typed it in Chat GPT and answered, and I could have answered it that way, and let Mike let Mike see what he thought about that. But from a generative AI standpoint, there's a couple of risks that a company should be thinking about it. The first one is it can do a lot. It can do a lot, but should it do things for you, right? So for instance, if you're thinking about ChatGPT and all the use cases, you might, delegating authority or having the input on the safety, a safety process or approval or whatever, probably is not a great thing to do. You have to think about what it can do versus what you should do. Also, the generative AI tools, not just ChatGPT, but they're not, when you talk to a human, they have some level of context, right? I think this may be the right answer, or we're very confident, or we have a low level of confidence that this is the right thing. When you go into the generative AI models right now, the answer is the answer, right? So there's the risk of the content, not having that context, and then the disinformation around that. So there's things that, of course, there's the IP protection, privacy considerations, and then in general, cybersecurity risks around, things like prompt jacking is a new attack vector that can be exploited. And then, generative AI, is not always used for good. It could be used for bad, malware generation, or even thinking about how it will impact social engineering and phishing attempts. It could be very interactive, and be much more real than what happens today. So there's a lot of considerations, particularly with that example, that you have to go through. And in this case, for generative AI, really create a responsible, I'll say, AI framework that your company can operate in.
Yeah, that's a great response, Deneen. And wish Mike and the company you well with the board. They do great work, cloud computing for nonprofits, healthcare, higher ed, religious organizations, right? So really interesting customers out there. So really cool. Another question comes from Brian Watson, who's my co-author of a book called Confessions of a Successful CIO. And he and I were just joking the other day, if and when we write the book, Confessions of a Successful CISO, you will be called. We're going to be talking to you and unpacking your story here. But Brian has a lot of respect for you and your body of work. So let's listen to this. He's got a really great question for you.
Okay, great.
Thanks for taking my question, Deneen. Thinking about how much is changing in cybersecurity and the fact that the pressure that CISOs and their teams are under is higher than ever, what do you think are the most critical leadership skills for CISOs today and in the future that maybe could land them in the Hall of Fame like yourself? Thanks.
Congratulations on the Hall of Fame, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah,
a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah. That was great.
Yeah. So what are those leadership skills you think, Deneen?
So first of all, I think, this is kind of my mainstay that I always say is really being able to create trusted relationships. So that takes time, effort, and a lot of work to be able to do that. But if you think about what you do as a cybersecurity professional, as a CISO, you have to be trusted, implicitly trusted, right? To do the right thing, to have everyone's back. So you have to work at that. It's great that a lot of us come with domain expertise, and that gets you to a point, right? But you have to work on having those trusted relationships and really developing that. So again, that implicit trust, people say, "That's going to do the right thing. I know it." And we'll make sure that they have your back as well too. Secondly is around communication and storytelling. I think that is so important. Cybersecurity, technology risk, digital risk management, they're all kind of like these concepts, right? That people are like, well, I kind of get it. Yeah, that makes sense. But they really can't say what it is or what the problem is. A lot of times when I, ask a question, even to, maybe people that are running programs for me, I'm like, well, what problem are we trying to solve? They say, well, we're blocking this, then that, the other. I'm like, no, that's not what I asked you. I asked you, what problem are we trying to solve? So really being able to tell the story around what the issues are, what the risks are in a relatable, natural language way that makes sense to people is important. And that will be able to, that you'll be able to, I think, get a lot more buy-in for your initiatives, or people will kind of rally around for you, as well as starting to connect the dots for you. So as they are doing their work, right? Maybe it's in accounts payable or treasury or whatever, they'll be like, hey, you told me this yesterday, or I listened to you talk and I was thinking about what I'm doing, and, that makes sense now. I should really think about that. So that's like, when that happens, that's like, I love that. That's like success for me, a measure of success for me when I can do that. And then lastly, really is systemic thinking is that systemic systems thinking. As a CISO, you have to be able to do that. Your world is everything. You can't be an expert on everything, but you have to understand the relationships around what matters. And if something is happening here, what's the downstream impact or the upstream impact or whatever. So, really that systems thinking will help. And I think that differentiates a lot of really successful CISOs and technology professionals as well.
Yeah, I love those three. And I was just thinking, as you were talking about communicating, storytelling, is there a great metaphor that you tend to lean on when you're trying to communicate difficult topics, that to an audience that may not understand the nuances?
Well, I think for me, I wouldn't say it's easier, but I work in a safety conscious industry. So there's a lot of analogies that I can pull in from, the way we maintain airworthiness on aircraft, the way we handle safety issues and things like that. So I tend to make sure that it's in that context. I don't use hey, this is the house, the windows are open, like a lot of, or like sports metaphors or things like that. I think it's easy for me because we're immersed in that safety culture and that operational resiliency and excellence, and everybody gets it. That's why we're there. So I tend to use the airplane analogies that way.
I mean, it's brilliant, right? Because what matters to the people you're communicating with? What are they intuitively? You called it earlier the muscle memory. That's so good. Kind of playing this theme a little bit longer. And Brian, thank you for that great question. Our friends over at Lightcast have done some research around the state of cyber leadership, and they found that only 22% of current cyber leaders at all levels have managed previously. That means 8 out of 10 cyber teams are being led by somebody without prior management background. So just curious your thought on that, but how are you going about building a pipeline? You're very intentional about this.
Yes. Yeah. Definitely, the technical aspects are great. Like, you have to have that baseline of technology and the domain expertise in whatever you're doing from a cyber standpoint. But the leading and managing people, either directly as direct reports in the hierarchy of your team, or indirectly, is super important. That ability to influence and create shared vision, shared needs, shared goals is really, really important. And I think, as we develop leaders, as I think about that, if there's potential there, like, you see that potential, it's really giving someone the opportunity to influence without authority. Because if they're successful that way, then they can start to build a team, because people respond to you if you're in the org chart. If you say, hey, do this, they're more than likely going to do it, because you have influence over their performance rating, how much they get paid, things like that. But if it's a cross-functional team and you have really no direct authority over whatever outcome you're trying to drive, and you can get people on board and everybody collaborating to that, again, shared outcome, that's the first kind of step of leadership. And I think that's really important. And I think people need to think about leadership more in that way, rather than having a huge team or how many people report to you or whatever, because that you could have a bunch of people but not be a great leader. So
Yeah. No, I hear that a lot. And one of the other things that I find, great leaders like yourself, your days are so full, right? Your weeks are packed. But still you find that ability to bring energy. You bring that A game every day for yourself, your people. But I think the real magic is be able to energize people. So do you do that intuitively? How do you do that every day? I mean, that's just incredible given all that's coming at you.
well, I think being a leader, whether you like it or not, people are taking cues off you, right? So how you show up and how you represent is going to set the tone for everything else, right? So I have I have a few trusted people, like my peers and even some of my people on my team, where I can go and vent and be like, oh my God, like I can't even do this anymore, right? And that's all fine and good for the 5 minutes that I can do that. But I've developed those trusted relationships that and everybody, we're all human. Everybody needs to do that, right?
Right.
But when you do have to show up, and you do have to have the right attitude, the right energy, because that does set the tone for the rest of the team. It takes work. It is exhausting, it is exhausting. So, I make sure that I am present and I'm actively listening, right? And I'm not, even if I'm, kind of like not in the best mood, or frustrated or irritated, that it's not projecting and changing the dynamic of what we're trying to accomplish. So I'm very, very intentional and very aware about that. Again, that takes practice, because when I was younger and earlier in my career, I mean, and I still kind of have those regression, but you could see everything on my face, right? And you could I would just be like, oh my God, like you can't do that. You can't do that when you're kind of trying to lead the charge. So that's kind of how my philosophy on that. And then I also, when you're on 24/7, when you're interacting with people, you start your day at a meeting at, 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, and then you're to lunch with people, and then you have meetings, and then you're to dinner with people, and maybe grab a drink there. I mean, that's a long day. And, it's 3 or 4 days of that stuff. I mean, I do take time for myself. So I need like to be by myself and do things to recharge, or, I would not be able to kind of keep going. So I have to do that.
I find there's a difference between people who are proactive about reaching out, building, I think network is kind of the old term. I talk about it more in connection, right? But those who do that have that phone a friend, have that peer group, have other thought leaders. How do you go about that? Like, what advice would you give people in terms of how you do it to have meaningful connections?
Yeah. So, I mean, I again make time to reach out. I schedule that. I'm like, oh, I haven't talked to this person for a while. I need to follow up with them, just check in, see what's going on. So I'm very intentional about making sure that I'm, keeping like, in contact with folks, and creating, not just around work stuff, but, whatever's important to them. I make sure I understand that as well too. So, again, that takes work. That takes a lot of time, and I'm not great at it. Sometimes, I'm like, oh, I should have talked to that person 3 months ago, and now I need something, and I haven't talked to them for 3 months, and oh, I'm going to look like, whatever. But, I really do just try to make sure that I'm in, like, just, short, you know, short contact, constant little bursts of, connection, like you said, to make sure that I'm doing that. And then I also, participate a lot in the peer like groups as well too. Cause those are curated and facilitated as well too. So, you get that kind of benefit of learning from others, but you're also kind of on the side, like, you could ping somebody and say, hey, I really liked what you said there, and you're creating that connection and relationship on a different level than just the meeting that you're in with them. So those are a couple ways I do it.
These jobs are too big. They're too hard, right? What you saw 2-3 years ago, you see new things today. So you're going to have that connection. One of the fun things we do here on the program is we have the scholarship, right? In your case, we have Cyber LX, a 9-month leadership program. And we'd like to give you the ability to gift a seat in that program to one of the organizations that you and United support. So wonder if somebody comes to mind.
So, I love the organization called Share the Mic in Cyber. I've been involved with them for a couple of years. They're an organization that started to address, I'll say racism in cybersecurity and really support Black cyber professionals as and amplify and their voices in a way that was really unique and meaningful. So I would love to be able to, engage. I always engage with them, but I'd love to be able to give them the scholarship there. So great.
That's awesome. Yeah, let's get connected with them. And I have not heard of them. So it's Share the Mic.
Share the Mic in Cyber. Yeah.
In cyber. Okay, fantastic. And big shout out to my ITSMF friends too. ITSMF, great organization that'll probably be very familiar with that. So that's really good. Well, we've kind of come to the end of our time together here on the podcast, but you and I are going to spend a few more minutes here, and we're going to publish a blog post digging more into your playbook. And I'm excited about that. Some of your communication techniques that you use that really allow you to be successful and more. But I know our audience has been, I'm inspired. I'm energized, Deneen. So thanks so much. And just appreciate all that you do for not just United, but our profession.
Great. Well, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Excellent. We'll see you all again soon.
Developing a robust pipeline of future-ready IT leaders who know how to show up and engage differently is paramount to success today. If you would like to learn more about the Tech LX Leadership Development Program that Dan talks about in the podcast, we invite you to visit techwhisperers.net. Equip your workforce with a new mindset and skill set needed to maximize impact, increase engagement, and build a world-class talent magnet brand. You've been listening to Tech Whisperers, inside the playbook of the best digital leaders, a Woolette and Associates podcast. Keep connected with us by subscribing to the show in your favorite podcast player. If you like what you've heard, please rate the show, as this helps us connect the world's best digital leaders with those who aspire to learn, grow, and thrive in this amazing profession. Thanks for listening. Until next time.